Hey y'all, this is the sheep brain dissection. We're going to talk about the external features first before we kind of dive in. So here is our sheep brain, and it's covered by this protective layer called the dura mater, and you can see it's almost like a cap here. And essentially, to get inside, we're going to have to cut through it in order to see some of the other features of the brain. And the dura mater protects and covers the brain. Next, we see this long, almost linear looking section here in the middle. That's going to be the longitudinal fissure. And the longitudinal fissure separates the left and right hemispheres. On the ventral side, so this is the dorsal side and this is the ventral side. On the ventral side, we have a couple features here we should probably go through. Starting with if we take a look and get our orientation figured out here, this is going to be the brainstem, so this is the front, or where the frontal lobe would be. And if we turn it over, these two distinct features are going to be the olfactory bulbs. Those receive input of odors found in the nasal cavity. Next, we have this horseshoe looking thing right here. That's going to be the optic chiasm. And that connects the retinal fibers to the optic tracts. And moving down, we see the brainstem, where the midbrain and the hindbrain would be. And then ultimately this connects to the spinal cord. So we're going to have to go inside and kind of remove the protective covering in order to look a little bit more deeper. Okay, so I have kind of cut through here the dura mater, and you can see that it's being held down here by these little connection points. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this. And there is this thin film on top of the cerebrum here, and that's going to be your pia mater. So I'm going to finish doing this and then we'll kind of regroup here. So we're going to look at the external features here of the brain now that the dura mater has been removed. So we've got the cerebrum, which is all of what you see here, right? And so the cerebral surface has grooves known as sulci. Those grooves are the black lines, as you can see. And those grooves are also surrounded by gyri. Gyri is plural for gyrus, and gyri are like the surfaces here that I'm pointing at. There is the medial longitudinal fissure, and we've got the four lobes of the brain in the cerebrum. The frontal lobe, which for the two hemispheres is right here. If you're just looking at one hemisphere, it'd be right here. And we have the central sulcus here. Parietal lobe, so for both hemispheres, parietal lobe. Then we have temporal lobe here, and the occipital lobe in the back. We also have the cerebellum. Not sure if you can see it. The cerebellum is back here. Cerebellum. And I can tell because it has a clear difference between the cerebrum and this section cerebellum. Then we have the brainstem. So we're going to, kind of dive in here. I'm going to make a cut down the longitudinal fissure so we can see the inside of the brain. Here are some other external features they're probably easier to see once we dive in, but I want to make sure we go over them. So we have the brainstem here, and that includes the pons, which is here, and you can see it's the pons because it's like a little bit more protruded out. So this is the pons. Then we have the medulla. Next, we have the spinal cord, which is here, and then the brainstem. All right, so I'm following the dissection guide number 9. I'm placing the brain in the tray, dorsal side up. Using my fingers, gently widen the medial longitudinal fissure, and then insert the scalpel. Okay. So, right off the bat, I can see a few things. The connection point between the two hemispheres is the corpus callosum, right here, on both hemispheres. I gotta continue cutting. This guy won't let me. There we go. We can see the cerebellum right here. Here is the cerebellum. And you can see the arbor vitae, the tree of life, as we call it. In the tree of life, the arbor vitae actually has like a purpose. It brings the sensory and motor information to and from the cerebellum. The cerebellum, in general, is for balance and coordination. Okay. Okay, so now we're inside. So let's go ahead and analyze one of the hemispheres. We have the corpus callosum here, which helps relay information between the two hemispheres. And then we have the diencephalon. The diencephalon contains 3 parts. The thalamus, which processes all sensory information. Inferior to that is the hypothalamus, which regulates homeostasis by processing information from the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system. And then we have the pineal gland, or the pineal body, which secretes melatonin and helps regulate sleep. Moving down, we have the midbrain here, midbrain. The midbrain sends auditory information to the thalamus and combines the visual, auditory, and somatosensory information. The pons is here. I kind of butchered it, my bad, but this is the pons. And the pons helps regulate your REM sleep, your REM cycle, and receives some of that descending information through the spinal cord. And it's pons is Latin for bridge between the cerebellum and the rest of the central nervous system. So here is the cerebellum once again, and the arbor vitae. And moving on down, we had the pons. Next is the medulla. The medulla oblongata processes the cranial nerve information and helps with your instinctual processing information. And this is the spinal cord. We need to review some of the sensory information in regards to the olfactory bulbs and the optic nerve. So the olfactory bulb, we saw it from the outside. If I put this back together here, right here. So from the side here, it's right here. We have the optic nerve here. I already severed it with the scalpel. And I think that's it for now. We have the superior colliculus. That's going to be helpful with light stimuli, or processing light stimuli. And then we have the inferior colliculus, and that's going to be processing sound stimuli. And lastly, we have the only ventricles we want you to know are lateral, third, and fourth. So the lateral ventricle is right here. and it holds cerebrospinal fluid. So ventricles are essentially like holding spots for fluids. They're like not holes, but they're essentially just spaces for a cerebrospinal fluid to flow and provide nourishment to the brain. So that's the lateral ventricle. Then we have the third ventricle, also holds cerebrospinal fluid here. And then we have the fourth ventricle, which also holds cerebrospinal fluid, and that's going to be back here at the cerebellum. So this gap here. Not sure if you guys can see that. Let's see. Closer right here.